Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. Today, we've got a really cool guest that Chris and I have been working with for a number of years. We're going to get well into some topics around digital advertising and what banks should be doing and maybe shouldn't be doing, and how to think about digital advertising as part of your program. So, without further ado, I'm excited to get into this. So, Chris, welcome. Shannon, welcome. I'll let Chris dive in and get us further in here.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Great to see you. Shannon, we are very excited about having you. It's going to be a fun conversation today. So I want to give our audience here kind of at least an idea of who you are and excited about our digital advertising conversation today. Going to be really great and resourceful for everybody. So, well, folks, so this is Shannon Dominguez. She is one of the senior directors and is a director of client success with Brkthru. You guys work with agencies across the country in digital advertising. And I know that your specialty areas in sales and consulting and working directly with agencies in partnership is a big part of that. And that's going to flow really well for our listeners into an understanding both of agency relationships and for community banks and others, how that can benefit them, and also just some great meat and potatoes around digital advertising. So I know that you're based in Louisville, Kentucky. You're originally from New York. And it's really great. Your husband, Chris, and your son, Patrick, and you have a special announcement?
Yes,
now?
we're expecting. So
right.
Patrick is going to be a big brother. We don't know the gender. It will be a surprise, but we are due at the end of June. So very, very exciting to grow
Awesome.
the family.
Congratulations.
You heard it here first, people.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Fresh news. So, and that will be adding for you guys because you've got a rescue pup, you've got 2 horses. You guys are busy on top of your days spent selling digital media and living in the digital media world.
For sure. And my end goal is to have an animal rescue someday. So, digital advertising, I think, is just going to be the way to fund said animal rescue. Or sanctuary. I think sanctuary is probably I don't know if I could do the rescuing and give away, the animals. So I think I'm just going to keep them all myself. But we'll see how that works with my husband's game plan.
Kind of the we bought a zoo approach.
That is hopefully going to be my life here in the next few years. It kind of already is, a couple animals, a couple kids. So just hopefully more kids and more animals.
Love that. Well, Shannon, Dan, as you mentioned, you guys have worked with both of our agencies for quite a number of years now. And because both of our agencies are focused in the bank marketing arena, we began this conversation with you. And in fact, you guys had released some information that broadly was around digital advertising for 2023. We're recording this here at the beginning of the year and kind of forecast thinking. And so what directions are we going and all of that? So start us off, Shannon, just kind of with some of your thoughts around things that bank marketers and other marketers should really consider around digital, given our current marketing environments.
For sure. I mean, I think you're spot on. The back half of last year, early this year, a lot of shakeup in the industry, in the advertising industry, tech world, those layoffs, AI, ChatGPT. I always get, I'm really glad that I was able to get the name properly because I always want to say CPT so I'm glad that I got ChatGPT down. But in also the current economic state as well. So when we think about how to spend in a recession, or, in an economic downturn. I think there's some things that we consider. We could probably do a whole topic on that, but we're going to avoid that because I wasn't so hot in econ in my college classes. But one recent study did show that Americans are collectively sitting on like $1.7 trillion in excess savings that they kind of have saved up from the pandemic. So we know that there's a lot of savings there. I think they're going to start to, or I think they're going to continue to, try to hold on to that. So what we're looking to do is try to highlight with our bank marketers those offerings that are going to be low risk. We saw a lot of CD advertising in 2022. I think that if, people pulled back and kind of are starting to look at mortgages as we get into the spring, don't completely give up on your CD advertising as well. I think that, they should continue to bring awareness to those arenas, knowing that there's a lot of savings and people, looking to be in low risk areas of how to continue their investments.
Yeah, there's definitely, in banking especially, there's definitely a lot of kind of going with the flow, right? Mortgage rates are up this year. So understandably, a lot of banks backed off on that. Put the money into CDs, but we're figuring out things that work. There's still going to be excess savings, even if mortgage rates dip a little bit and that market picks up. So we're big proponents of don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like the more you can kind of spread it around, the better. I know we had a recent episode on what. With the looming, potential looming recession, a lot of banks try to pull back, but we're proponents, I think you are too, of not doing that, sticking with it and using it to find new opportunities.
For sure. No, I mean, Dan, you're spot on. There's one really good case study. If we look at from, Brkthru clients in 2020, we had a very similar situation where, you touch on a client wanted to pull back. Because of COVID, April 2020, they didn't want to keep their budget live. They were, obviously able to, they had revenue coming in. They didn't have to shut down their business completely. So we were able to convince them to keep 50% of their budget live. They ended up gaining 24% market share over their competitors in that time because every competitor had that same idea that they initially had of, let's pause our advertising, hold on to our funds. So I think that's a really good lesson. And if you do a quick Google search, you're going to find that just about every large brand who has big market share continues to spend during a recession. They don't fear that, the scare tactics of I need to stop, I need to save and keep all of our money. Instead, they're going, I'm going to beat out my competitors during this tough time. Another thing to think about is having a fluid budget. Because during this time, so often we're thinking we want conversions. And I think, conversions are important, but also don't go dark with your awareness tactics because that's how you are going to get that brand awareness over your competitors.
Yeah. How do you, when you're planning a digital ad campaign, kind of how do you think about, maybe talk a little more about like what, awareness versus conversion? Because I think it's, with banks, it's a little different. Like the conversion typically takes a long time. It's a big, hassle to get people to switch. And, a lot of it is that brand building. So how do you think about setting that up when you're planning a campaign?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I know that we've worked with plenty of strategies for your, local community banks and credit unions, and, taking a look at, what that budget should be. I think that's kind of the first step is, how much budget do they have? Typically, banks spend about 2% of their retail sales on their advertising efforts, but that's all advertising. So that's going to be their traditional, their grassroots efforts. So, typically, Chris, Dan, when you guys come to us with, some ideas, we're meeting collectively to determine, what percentage of that 2% really gets dwindled down into a digital budget. Typically, we find around, 30 to 50% of the budget should be in digital tactics. And then from there, we're trying to understand what's their end goal. Most of the time it is, that new customer, whether that's for a mortgage or a CD or a personal checking. But trying to build out the difference in we know that most of them are going to walk in the door. They're probably not, filling out a form or a phone call. So how do we get them in the door? What tactics do we have to use? As you mentioned, awareness. So top of the funnel, get them familiar with your brand. So that's going to be your video, your display ads, and then mid funnel, some of your social tactics. Again, some display ads, and then bring that down to a retargeting display ad, and paid search for those conversion tactics.
Shannon, do you think some of this is? I love your example of that client that retained at least 50% of their spend during a time of fear. I mean, let's go ahead and say it. And so do you pull back, or do you take advantage of the opportunity to stay ahead of your competition, or potentially outrun them in the case study that you mentioned? So that's great. So I was looking at this, and I'll share this with you guys and actually the audience as well. But there was a recent American Bankers Association survey, and one of the things that they were looking at is what type of business model are you using? And out of 150 marketers that were surveyed, 45 of them said they were just sustaining, but 78 of them said they were in high growth mode. So I think so much of this, and particularly in the digital advertising world, because it moves and we can be responsive and get out there in front quickly and those types of things, is kind of what's the mindset, of your bank. So I wanted to throw that out there for our listeners and say, if you're looking to just sustain where you are, that's one thing. But Shannon, you mentioned, growing market share. And I know that's what we hear our clients chomping at the bit to do. So, as they do that, there's so many opportunities in those strategies out there. And I love that you kind of ran through so many of those different tactics. Your team helped us with strategizing with one of our Louisiana clients not too long ago, who has been in SEM and display tactics for quite a while now. And, they happened to mention to us in one of our check-in meetings with them that they just didn't feel like they were getting anything out of their local radio spend and some other things and all of that. And we were like, well, wait a minute. What if you're dying to be on audio? What if we put you on some streaming audio? So you're out there, and some streaming video and all that. And they're biting into that a little bit, and they're seeing the benefits of moving those directions. So, and while what we found out is a lot of their local competitors are pulling back on their spend, and they're diversifying their tactics. So we're like, man, let's go. And I think that's a great point.
For sure. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, moving forward. There's an opportunity to gain 10% new customers. Big banks are basically, the frustrations from those big banks. So you're spot on. Where are we going to gain those? Most banks are doing some type of paid search or some type of, display ads. But you're right. They're probably not doing those upper funnel tactics because those are, a little more costly. They don't see the immediate conversions. So, when we start to look at that audience of, the bank switchers, you hit spot on where they're getting their information from. And it is that, generating that brand awareness play. So I think that it was 76% are more likely to respond to an ad when they're served on a podcast. So, hey, maybe some of our listeners or some of our banks want to, start to sponsor this podcast. I swear the guys didn't pay me to say that. And then 54% are more likely than the average person to respond to a bank ad when it's seen on, like you said, streaming TV or some type of online video. So I think as banks look to try to figure out how do I gain market share, do it from an awareness standpoint. And Dan, you made a good point. It's such a slow conversion cycle. So you have to kind of think of, using these tactics 3, 6, 12 months out.
Yeah, I think something really interesting tends to happen in the mind of bankers when you start talking about digital, right? Because digital advertising is so trackable, right? If you're doing a newspaper ad, you don't know who looks at it. Nobody comes like waving the newspaper into the bank saying, I want this deal. But digital, you track clicks and you track, engagement with it. You track video views. And so I think when that happens, if you're not in the space, the digital space day in and day out, you tend to think, well, hey, this isn't working. We're not getting that many clicks. But the point of a lot of your digital ad should be awareness, which is like equivalent to the billboard or the newspaper ad. So you might not get the clicks, but you get that brand awareness, and then you might get more traffic. And the people coming in might not know, oh, I saw your ad, because they've actually seen it 30 times over 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of inherently know your brand. And then when it comes time to switch, you're top of mind. But I think the bigger point is too that, like, for a bank, I work with so many banks that like they'll spend $1 million or more on a new brick and mortar location, right? Which is important for their growth. And a lot of people will switch banks based on where the branches are. But if you're not also on digital, you're pretty just invisible and irrelevant to the younger generations that you want to attract. Even if they drive by your branch every day, right? But they never see you on digital, you seem stodgy. And these banks spend $1 million or more on a brick and mortar branch, but then it's a struggle to get them to spend $1,000 a month or something small on digital that will just kind of enhance their footprint. Yeah, anyway, I'm on a little soapbox there, but
no, honestly, you're spot on, because I think that so often we think we need a brick and mortar location. And that's, if we think about it, the baby boomers are more likely and the older generations are more likely to go to a brick and mortar location. And I think that one statistic that I saw recently is most bank customers live within a 3-mile radius of their bank. But we're forgetting that so many of the statistics show that the younger generations are doing it all online. So they don't need to live within a 3-mile radius anymore. As long as we're hitting those individuals with display or video or audio ads, they will find out about your brand. And like you mentioned, they probably are still driving by your brand location, but they're not going to stop in the same way that the older generation is.
Well, we're not, I don't think any of us we're not advocating like forget brick and mortar and go all digital advertising, but like it's a balance. It's, if you want the brick and mortar to attract older generations that do come into the branch and have more savings, good. But like, in the same breath, a lot of digital marketing planning comes to reaching the younger generation. And, I think we'll dive into social soon, but, just purely from the advertising standpoint, you just have to get your brand out there and make yourself viable.
For sure. Yeah. I think that, so often, like we've said, is you want that brick and mortar, you want the older generation because that's where the money is, but we're forgetting that younger generation is, about to start to take over, in a lot of economic areas. So I think you make a good point of how do you reach them? And like you mentioned, social is probably the way to go. And that's kind of the future of the marketing to younger generations. One thing that I heard 2 weeks ago, and then I started to do more research on it, is, and I will be honest, I am not a TikToker. I do not have an account, but I heard that TikTok is now over 40% of US users ages 18 to 24 are finding their information by doing a search on TikTok or Instagram versus Google. So while we don't think of TikTok as a search engine, it's becoming a search engine. So if I'm a bank marketer and I hear that statistic, I'm calling one of you guys or both of you guys and saying, how are we going to, reach that younger generation on TikTok? Are we going to do organic content? Are we going to do paid content? Are we going to do a blend of both? I think that that's something that, like I mentioned, I'm not on it. I guess that's because I'm 34, so I don't fit. I'm 10 years too old to fit into that category. But and obviously I'm an anomaly, I guess. I think all my, friends my age are actually on TikTok. But how are we going to reach them if I'm a bank marketer? I think that I'm going Instagram, TikTok. And I think most banks know, Facebook, Instagram. They're not thinking TikTok, especially because, if you're a local brand, you don't have a very large budget. Like you mentioned, you have the budget to build a brick and mortar, but you're forgetting that, hey, maybe you put, 15, 20,000 a month, or not a month, or maybe a month. Choose your budget. Again, back to that 2% of your bank retail sales. But, putting some money aside to figure out how to build out some TikTok content, I think would be very helpful if you're looking at it from a perspective of how do I reach that younger generation.
Well, I think the really interesting thing about TikTok, and I saw an article recently too that was talking about how most Gen Zers spend most of their time on YouTube, right? It's probably a combination, but it's all video driven. But I think the biggest difference for banks to realize is it's not just videos. You're not just like getting an exec to say, here's the benefits of a savings account, right? It's much more like user-generated entertainment, infotainment type of stuff that, but done in a very authentic way. So it's for banks, especially, I think it's hard, right? You can say, yeah, we need to be on TikTok, but it's really hard to actually do it. How do you create that content that's authentic and relevant to the younger generation? If you're struggling to reach them in the first place, or this is your first kind of foray into digital.
Yeah. One of the things that through this conversation we keep touching on too really goes back to versatility in what it is that in the digital realm we're able to do. So we're not signing a 12-month contract for an outdoor board. We're not, committing to a whatever contract on print or whatever. And again, it's not to put down other platforms, but what it is, Shannon, and I know you guys see so much of this, that versatility can either be in product or service exchange. Like early in the conversation, you mentioned, hitting CDs and those types of things. Those rates can change. Those things can, we may talk to one of our bank clients that says, hey, we need to switch this out or change this part on our landing page that these digital ads are going to. And we can do that in, give me 2 hours. You're done. Or some of those changes, that type of thing. So it's around product and service versatility, but it's also, I love that you brought this up too, around audience versatility. Dan, whether it's on YouTube or Google or social or wherever it is, we're able to go to our audiences as marketers, I think, so much better than traditional advertising, which took probably more repeated touches, and in a lot of ways could be much more expensive. Shannon, you've mentioned budget several times too, but I mean, the truth is you can be far more targeted and sometimes much more efficient in your budget spend. But anyway, my point is, do you see a lot from us agency folks that are doing this on behalf of our bank clients that really are taking advantage of that versatility?
For sure. I think that you're spot on how quickly we can change your rate, especially if, you're advertising that in social copy. That's a 1 to 2 hour turnaround, like you mentioned. If you need, websites updated, I've seen, you're two of the best at, the website advertising for banks. And I know how quickly you and your team can turn that around. So you're spot on with rates. I mean, typically within 24 hours, you have that new rate live where, you're not having to reach out to a TV station to get, the ad swapped, or like you mentioned, the billboard. I mean, forget those days, or print. And like you mentioned, obviously those all help. All those tactics help the digital campaign as well. So there's definitely a place for it. Not saying to completely pause all your traditional marketing, but I do think that there's, a lot more flexibility and versatility in your, like you mentioned, your audience targeting, your, ability to make changes on the fly. And then, one thing that we haven't touched on is, the ability to start retargeting off of, users that visit the website that have seen an ad but haven't taken action. So there's a lot of, capabilities that we can, retarget and, drive that person, because so often, as you mentioned, you need to see an ad. They might have seen an ad 60 times, but they're going to say that it's because they drove by, and at, that moment they drove by and realized that you're 3 miles away and they need a mortgage. They're not going to say it was, the 60 different types of ads they saw over the course of the last 6 months.
Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point of like doing retargeting ads. I think another area where a lot of banks struggle is just how to do this stuff. Like we start working with a lot of banks that, well, we ran a Google ad, we ran an AdWords ad, or we ran a Facebook ad, and it just didn't work. It didn't do anything, right? But they did it themselves. It was kind of a, low priority kind of thing. And I think to do a retargeting ad in an efficient way, or to make your Google ads and your Facebook ads kind of sing, it takes a concerted effort. It's not just Facebook and Google. It's in their best interest to make it easy to throw a credit card in, type in a couple banking related terms, and let it make a smart campaign and do all the things for you. But that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do it. And I think that's why I know that's why Chris and I started working with Brkthru. Is you guys live in these platforms all day and know this stuff in and out. And I've been in digital advertising for 20 some odd years, but I'm not in the platforms every day. So I can talk the strategy, I can talk the media mix and help make the plans. But I think digital marketing is at a point today where you need somebody that knows how to optimize the campaigns. And I think for retargeting is a really simple thing to do, but I wanted to make the point that it's only simple if you have the right kind of partner. It's actually hard to set up yourself, but it's really easy to do if you've got a partner to work with.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of money that you can waste, like you mentioned, just by, setting up a campaign and forgetting it, and, not having proper parameters or optimizations. There's that human element. So often I think that the tech platforms say well, it's easy to, let our algorithm do the work. You need both. You need a human and an algorithm working together, monitoring and optimizing accordingly.
That's a great thought there. And you guys are talking about the expertise that we as marketers and as digital marketers can give to our clients. So Dan, it's kind of that question is, does a bank marketing director need to be spending intense amounts of time learning how to get into those digital ad placement platforms and how to run them most efficiently, and touching them constantly and moving spend because certain geographies or certain audiences are doing better, or do they need to be, talking with their C-suite folks and when working around strategy and those type of things? Well, the answer is B. They need to be spending that time around that, and let all of us do the technical work in that. Correct?
Yeah. Well, Shannon, you can respond to that too. But just to add in, focus your time on the messaging. Focus your time on your brand and differentiators as a bank. But hiring somebody or spending time learning, the Google Ads UI or the Facebook Business Manager UI, which is a time suck for anybody, even the experts. It's just not. Should not be core to the what a bank marketer does.
For sure. And I think that, to expand on that also, there's so many, like you mentioned, the frustrations that you experience in those UIs and the customer service that you sometimes, the frustrations that you feel when you have an issue and you can't get a hold of, your Google rep. And I'm not knocking Google or your Facebook rep. I'm not knocking them, but obviously they have a lot larger fish to fry than, some of the budgets that we work within. So that, being said, I think, having that expert that knows how to fix that without having to reach out to, our Google rep, or, when we do get to that problem, we spend enough that, maybe when we raise our hand, we're listened to a little bit, more closely. So I think that, you're spot on. If you're spending money as a bank marketer, or you are the bank marketer that's in that platform, or you're the C-suite that's, paying someone to run your Google ads, you're probably, actually losing money because of the time that it's requiring your team. It's just not, they can't be as efficient as someone that's their sole job.
Yeah, not and we try to not be salesy on this podcast, but whether it's a Brkthru or whether it's somebody on Fiverr, what you're kind of looking for is like somebody that spends their most of their time in that platform, because it changes, right? I mean, probably since we started recording this, there's been like multiple changes to the Google Ads platform, and it's requesting verification and doing all these things that take so much time and an effort to navigate, and it's only getting more complicated. So
yeah, and Shannon, you mentioned a little while ago too about the set it and forget it, and Dan, I think that's so much of what you and I see out there, and some of that may be some of these community banks, and they're using their local media company that has been at one time was a daily and now is a weekly or an every other week newspaper or whatever the case may be, who has gotten into digital advertising. So what I'm seeing out there in most of those situations is those media companies are running digital ads for a tire shop, a bakery, and a bank, and they're kind of doing it the same way. And, that's way off from, and don't you agree, Dan? It's so way off from what we see working in banking all day and knowing how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, even we run a couple radio campaigns on one of the big, there's like 3 big radio companies, not the little local stations, but the big national ones. There's like 3 companies that do it, and even those big stations are constantly trying to upsell us on, hey, we'll run digital advertising for you. But like when you look at it, what it really is they put some banner ads on the radio's website. But like, that's not a digital ad, campaign for a bank, right? Yeah. If it's cheap, maybe it gets you a little bit of exposure, but that's not going to, make everything ROI positive. So, I think there's a lot of those like upsells and other things that other, traditional advertising companies are trying to do to maintain the relevancy, but it's a lot different than running a retargeting campaign off of your website. Yeah, it just comes down to the tactics. But I think the traditional companies tend to call it like, we'll run a digital campaign for you, but it sounds a lot more grander than it is.
For sure. And you're spot on. I mean, look, ask to see the site list and you'll realize that they're really not site agnostic. So like you mentioned, you're just on their, website. You're not, on all the other sites that your user is most likely visiting, not just those 3 radio sites.
Yeah. I think the big, if I'm summing that up for the show notes or whatever, yeah. I think the takeaway is like, find a partner, find a platform that lets you run advertising. I love that term, site agnostic, just everywhere, right? And then, make sure that partners is incentivized on your campaign performing, not on you spending on a particular platform. If you run Google Ads, Google is incentivized to get you to spend more money on their platform, even if the best bet for your bank is to spend some on Facebook or spend some on site retargeting. But if you have a partner, if you work with, there's some self-service platforms out there too. If you work with one of those that lets you run anywhere, then all these options we've been talking about this whole episode, site retargeting, streaming audio, all those things are part of the plan. Mm-hmm. And to be a well-rounded, digital bank marketer, you need to have all that stuff in mind. Just go back to that point of just throwing $500 towards Google Ads to see what it does. It's not going to work.
Right. And then saying, we tried digital advertising. Yeah. It didn't really work for us. So, yeah. Dan, I know you and I've heard that story many times.
Yeah. But if they roll that out 20 years, that's not a sustainable strategy. You're saying, it didn't work for us, and now we're just never going to do it again, because everything's only getting more and more digital, right? So there's a few of those local newspapers left. But if you look back 10, 15 years, there was a ton more. And if you look forward 10, 15 years, it's going to be even more bleak. So, as a bank, you've been around 100 years. You want to be around another 100, go with the times.
Love that. Well, Shannon, we knew this was going to be resourceful, engaging, helpful. I know that our audience has been able to kind of soak in some great takeaways from this. I loved kind of your forecasting for where we are and the year, and then you used the words steal market share. I bet there were some that kind of reached over and turned their volume up. What'd she say? Steal market share. That's a big one. So thanks for sharing those thoughts and talking about versatility, and you gave us some great case study examples too that I think our audience can really kind of sink their teeth into, and attracting younger crowds and lots of things that we covered. So thanks so much for sharing all of this with us.
Of course. And obviously you two are very well versed in this industry. And I think that, your clients and future clients will continue to, all of your knowledge that you share will continue to just help them grow. And like you said, steal market share and reach the younger audiences. So, and you guys are two of the best in the game.
Thank you. Well, Shannon, we love to take guests through a lightning round to kind of wrap up the episode and get us to let us know a little bit more about you, how you operate, kind of what you're about. So, so Dan, you want to run Shannon through? I bet she can handle the gauntlet here.
Yeah. All right, Shannon, can you share a personal best or business best or both?
So I'll do both. How about that? Personal best is, I think, just being a mom, a working mom. I think that probably so many of your listeners can relate to that, or a working parent at that. I always thought that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I don't want to make this look like how everyone on Instagram looks at parenting is easy, because it's not. But I am proud to, have found a way to stay pretty balanced, and I'm very thankful for Brkthru for having that flexibility as a company to allow us to work remotely and to, not have to spend long hours commuting, picking my kid up from daycare, things like that. So, being a working mom, I'm very proud of that personal best. And business best, I think, I was actually Brkthru's first employee in 2017. So while I'm proud of my own personal growth, and I didn't actually have a sales career prior to joining Brkthru. So, very thankful for them giving me that opportunity and having been able to hit revenue goals and sales numbers that I didn't even think were possible. But I'm actually more proud to say that I'm the first employee of a company that within 5 years has been able to be on the Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing companies. So that's just been a really exciting and fun ride.
Awesome. How about favorite book or other resource?
So I wish that I could say that I'm really, really great at reading up on industry trends. I love to read, but I think since I spend so much of my day doing digital advertising, I'm a nonfiction lover. So I love an inspiring story. I think I've already read 4 books so far this year, and we're only in the second week of February. Favorite recent book that I've read is actually Life is So Good by George Dawson. He's a man who grew up in the early 1900s and learns to read at 98 years old. So he kind of takes you through, what he saw as an individual throughout his life, and how he remained positive no matter what life threw at him. So it's just served as a really good reminder of, you're only as happy as you make your mind up to be. So, if you're just looking for a really good, heartwarming story, he doesn't sugarcoat, any of his bad experiences, but, always sees the positive in, what life threw at him.
Got to try that one.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate of reading something different. Do something different with your mind than what you do all day. So that sounds like a good story to pick up. All right. What's the most impactful piece of advice you've ever gotten?
So I think that, I look back at my high school cross country coach, and he had all these funny one-liners like, don't waste a heartbeat. So basically, kind of that stay positive, take every day, as from a positive standpoint, or, hard work over time beats talent. So I love, those little mantras that have carried me through even into the working world. But I think you could also argue that when Jeff Hasted in 2016 16, he tells me, you should go into sales. And I'm like, absolutely not. But, over time, I let him wear me down and convince me not only to go into sales, but actually go into sales at his startup. And it has completely changed, my life, my career trajectory. I would have never met, either of you if I hadn't gone into sales. So, also probably one of the best career advice, pieces of advice that I could have received.
How about the opposite of that? Something you always tell your team or your clients?
So this is from a team perspective. And I mean, obviously a lot of my clients are ad agencies. So, you have clients as well. So I always try to say to find a way to put the clients first without sacrificing your own well-being. I think that in our world, we don't work in medicine. We're not, saving lives per se. There's no, ER emergency. But there's ad emergencies and, trying to, make sure that we're putting the client first, but not getting, to the point where we get burnt out and we're like, why are we doing digital advertising? So, always, I love that client first mentality, but also, make sure that, you have a good work-life balance.
Love that.
Love it. Well, yeah, you survived the gauntlet. How can how can people get in touch with you, learn more about you, learn more about Brkthru?
So I will say that Brkthru has a great social media following: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I touched on it. I don't have a TikTok and I don't do a good job at my LinkedIn or even like my social media content. So best way to get in touch with me is email. I think that, best way to get in touch with Brkthru, follow us on LinkedIn. Some of my colleagues do a really, really good job of just keeping people up to date on the trends. And obviously, like you mentioned, the whole reason that we're sitting here is because of the Brkthru newsletter that you all received. And you don't have to be a Brkthru client to sign up for that as well. So check us out on LinkedIn and get, signed up for our newsletter.
Love that. Well, and we'll put that contact information in the show notes in the episode on bankmarketingshow.com, Shannon, so that folks can reach out to you. And man, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you being with us today and imparting your time and wisdom with us. So we really do appreciate it.
Well, thanks again for having me. And, always a pleasure to sit down and chat, with you guys.
Love it. Thanks so much, Shannon.
Thank you,
and best
Shannon.
of luck with the new baby, too.
Thank you. Yes, right. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.